input on this entire topic. That is what I plan to do this afternoon. So for the second hour, we are going to look at the financial and economic aspect of these lockdowns. The financial and economic aspect of these lockdowns. Are they absolutely necessary now that we have vaccines? Because while yes, the virus is still spreading, what I have noticed is that yes, you contract COVID, but your chance of coming or becoming severely ill or dying decreases. That is what I've realized. And so if one, you have a strong immune system, fully vaccinated, whatever the case is, the science has proven that you stand a chance of standing up against the COVID. And so while countries have high vaccination rates, whether it be, well, more so among the adult population, some countries have started inoculating their children. So while countries have high vaccination rates, what is the rationale behind a 24-hour lockdown? And people always make the argument that it's not always about money. You can make the argument that, wait, you prefer somebody to die than, or you prefer to lose money, or the other way, sorry, you prefer somebody to die over making a few $100s. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. That is absolutely not the position that I'm taking. But we gotta think long term. We have to think long term. And I think some people have adopted the position or the attitude that every time there is a spread or every time there's an increase in numbers, hey, let's lock down the country. For what? That is my question. And it is fine for us to have our individual opinions, and I respect that. I really do. Sometimes before we even entertain these conversations, we really have to do some deep research, some deep analysis. We really have to dig deep, not just scratch the surface, but look at the entire situation from all angles possible. And that is why sometimes, I log off and I just say nothing else. But we have to look at it from all different angles, all different points. And so I've decided to, dig deeper to understand how Caribbean or how governments cope with financial crises. Because not only the COVID has brought a health crisis, it has also brought a financial crisis. And I remember having this conversation a few days ago, right here on Inside on Win FM with the voices. We're gonna call for a lockdown. Hey, let's lock down the country again. Let's lock it down. Let's stop everything from moving. And then we're going to cost the government. We're going to blame the government. We're going to blame the businesses for laying off people and saying the businesses have no heart and the government has no heart because they're laying off people. But you call for a lockdown. So that in and of itself clearly means that you don't understand the full brunt of a lockdown and what It really does. That is my take on the whole situation. We perhaps don't understand the lockdown in its entirety. So yes, while there is a health aspect to it, where you curb the spread, you slow the transmission of COVID, the thing about these lockdowns is that they really put people through some financial mess. And some of us is either we don't care, we're ignorant, or refuse to understand. But these lockdowns put people in some real financial mess, which leads right back to the mental problem we talked about earlier today. You know? So before we even think of it or call for it, do some research and ask yourself, in this time, is it absolutely necessary? Oh, the government ain't doing nothing for the people. The government ain't assisting the people. But you're calling for the government to lock down the country as if the government has a bottomless pit. So we have to really look at this entire situation from all angles. I like to be fair, you know. I don't like to be biased and just hold one side. We have a caller, we'll take this call. Caller, good afternoon, you're on the air.
How are you doing?
I'm
How are
doing good. Are
you?
you hearing me? I'm doing good. Are you hearing me clearly?
Oh yes, I can hear you better now.
Okay.
Before we go ahead, yesterday was the day of the International Day of the Elderly.
Yes.
All of the elderly out there, whether you're young or are playing young, from 62 up, you're old. You know, some people would die just to say the age. I'm 73 and I'm proud. Man, it's great to be alive at 73 and the faculty is working. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. So to all the elderlies, let me say seniors, but because they don't want to hear elderlies. This politically correct thing is getting out of hand, you know. You're differently abled. I mean, you're disabled.
And older persons.
And older persons. Man, you see? Oh, you see, because we don't have no respect for older people, that's what. Why don't go the way? Let me send you to a hush. We're making hush till 122. You know the amount of experiences and so that you would have acquired during your lifetime that if you don't share, it diminishes the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It diminishes the people.
I agree.
Anyway, let me get to the issue. Now, the first problem I think we don't understand what the economy means. The economy is not the government. The government is only one sector in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
You have agriculture, fishing, farming, livestock. Then you have the manufacturing sector. You know, what we call secondary sector. Things that use things that were produced in the primary sector to make things.
Yes.
And then you have retail and wholesale. That's where all the buying and the selling take place. Then you have telecommunication and transport, banking and finances, government and other services like household and sector that all the mechanic and whatever. So if we begin to look at the economy as a whole, we would stop this lot of government this and government that. Because as much as the government is trying, if the other sectors are not functioning, the economy will collapse. If the fishers can't fish and the farmers, so you lock down everybody then. We can't even get no fish. You know how we are. We want the place locked down. I hear them, you know. All production cannot take place within the household. That's the first thing. And the banks don't make money by printing money, in case some people don't know. Banks don't get a vault of money that they just take out. Banks make money by lending money, and the difference between the interest they pay you and what they get is the profit and the other fees for the services. That is it, you know. So when you have shutdown and people can't get to do anything, and all right now, so the banks, some of them even afraid to lend because all of us facing the same thing. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. So the loans they make are riskier. You realize that?
Mm-hmm. That is very true. Yes.
Yeah. I'm giving you the lessons, you know. I use the lecture to teach a lot. But you will learn as I go along, right? Because if you ain't get it, I will explain it to you. So, even the other day, I was listening to the IMF was in the Caribbean, they had a Caribbean something, and it was talking about the risky loans. When the loan becomes so risky, the corresponding banking thing can't work. That is part of the problem with the corresponding banking, that some of the loans are too risky. I hear some of the banking thing, oh, you get loan with no this and no that. There's a high risk, you know. Because even if you have a government job, it may seem permanent, but one morning, nothing there, you know. When the economy was booming, people said they had 9 buses and 4 buses on which they were paying the mortgage, eh?
Mm-hmm.
What happened now? You lock down the place, they can't even get to run one. They can't even get to park up in the circus. And you go to the manufacturing sector, lockdown. So the majority of the workers there are females, often the head of households with children in it. So you want to lock it down so the poor women them cannot even get to earn bread. Because bread they're going to be working for. Then you lock down the economy and the people them in flow and Digicel and cable and all the other things, they can't go to work. But yet you want to be on YouTube. All of these services require people, you know. Maybe sometimes so we call them, what would you call them? All kind of workers, special workers.
Essential workers?
Eh?
You mean essential workers?
Yes. That's why they call them essential, because their services can't function without them. Government earns money from taxes, fees, and fines. That's how government earn money. Well, since we're selling passports, let's call it what it is. Even though I don't support the mass selling, darling, the market for the passport shut up. Everything shut up. Everything. Because right now, that is what the government is running on, you know. They can't get taxes because a lot of the businesses had to close, especially the small businesses, even though they wasn't paying. A lot of them don't pay, I know. The lawyers and so. The lawyers have been, what do you call it, paper piece? That paper piece has sent some lawyers into poverty, you know. Because they were depending on every minute somebody kills somebody, they get 100,000, 75,000. No, I mean,
I hear you, yeah.
Are you sure they're gonna kill somebody? You know, and you go along, and the amount of social services that people demand from the government. Where does the money come from? So when you shut down Hospital and TDC, because it is only the larger companies who actually pay any significant amount of taxes. a lot of evasion going still, tax evasion. So when we are calling for the whole shutdown, and at the same time we're calling for our jobs, well, if a man have a little shop and it have to shut down, even a good size, a medium size one, if there is no income, there is no outlay. And if the income is reduced, of course, the outlay has to be reduced, and it might just happen to be you. Because a business can't stay in operation for long if they are not earning enough to break even, at least break even. Because electricity bills, and we're asking the government to give us free electricity. Mind, they don't have any oil fields, They don't have an oil field. They have to buy it. They have to buy it, and when you listen to the news, you hear on the world market, oil prices going up. So we are demanding more and more goods. More and more goods we are demanding, and at the same time, we are calling for no economic activity. It can't happen. It doesn't make sense. What we need to do, if we understand how the economy works, then the onus is on us to keep ourselves safe. Go and take the vaccine if you can. Put on the mask. Stop evading going into quarantine if you know that you are infected. It is now, the ball is now in our court, not in the government court. The ball is now in our court. A lot of what is happening can be avoided. People don't want to hear the truth. It can be avoided. You run into the back of your yard and you have a party. And everybody's stifling. Well, I don't like the mask, but I put it on. When I go to church, I put it on. So when we're thinking about the economy, how we expect the economy to go? You hear what happened in the USA yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
They had to try and keep the U.S. economy afloat. Afloat, the big America, who has the reserves, who could print money, say, look, we are past our capacity. We passed our capacity. Some of them worry how much $1 trillion debt they have and how they're going to get out of it. And they have to balance that against people out there. They want the rent pay, they want the this, they want that. And as they say, if the U.S. economy collapse, well, we have another depression, It would not be America alone. Just like how when the housing market collapsed, you had financial recession all over the world. It's the same thing. Our economy is more likely to collapse than them. So sometimes when the government, out of frustration, implement mandatory, it is us who cause it. We don't want to hear the truth. Oh, I ain't want a vaccine because it all right. Put on the mask. Oh, the mask stifling me. Oh, they ain't got no. I mean, really? Really? The economy only has not collapsed for two reasons. One is the citizenship money, and the other one is that there are certain sectors of the economy that are still working. Even though we say the hotel. Hotels now have resorted to quarantine centers, so they get short-term guests, and some of the workers get to work. So if they shut down everything, shut down the airport, don't let nobody come in. So, not in the little quarantine work they must get. I mean, I think it's our understanding. Nobody explained to us. Or we don't read. We don't read. The economic, when this thing is over, the government drawing down its reserves, You're not going to hear anything about we have no surplus after surplus.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, caller, thank you.
The surplus ahead of the surplus.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, caller, so much for your contribution. We want to take some more calls, so we'll end this one quickly with you, and we'll continue this conversation. Later on, we're going to play this clip which gives a breakdown of the whole global financial crisis that we experience and how Caribbean governments, not Caribbean governments, sorry, global economies and governments can respond or have been responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. You shared a lot of things, and I took the opportunity to listen to you carefully, as careful as possible, and I'm happy that you did that, and you perhaps just inspired me to organize a discussion about economics and how COVID-19 lockdowns affect the economy. So with time, this is something that I will definitely do, and to make it accessible to people in St. Kitts and Nevis so that we can really understand that there is a lot more behind just locking down the country. And I'm glad that you said that, the economy is not the government, or not just the government. We have this notion that the government, while the government is expected to do a lot and is expected to really, well, of course, manage and run the affairs of a country, they can't do it alone. They really, really can't do it alone. So while on one hand we're calling for more to be done, not just by government, but we're calling for private businesses to step up, to keep on employees, to do this, to do that. We're still calling for a lockdown. So my only wish is for that is for us is that when we have conversations like these, we're able to get enough information to back what we're saying, instead of just saying, "Oh, lock down the country because too much COVID there." You really have to evaluate the situation. And I find the problem we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis is that we tackle issues and we only scrape the surface. We never dig deep. We never dig deep. We like to talk about this and that, and we don't dig deep. And it's the same thing in the line of the Caribbean politics, where when your government not in power, everything is bad, and everything is just terrible. But as soon as the government gets in, everything is beautiful again. So we have these conversations and we never really dig deep enough or try to dig deep. We just scratch the surface. We want to take some more calls. Let's take this call. Caller, you're on the air. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Cornelius.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm giving thanks for life, and yourself?
Awesome. I'm good for the most part.
Okay, good. We all know when global world events as pandemics and other connotations comes our way, our economy will be affected severely. I think it was 2007 when something came our way, maybe on an economic aspect, but we were forced to reevaluate, readjust, and as a result, our economy had us to, make some adjustments. And so yes, these things will always affect us, and big and small businesses would be affected, but small businesses more so would be affected because we are at the lower Celsius in terms of businesses. Some, businesses just going to start up and stay with it, we are forced to be readjust and the like. So, yes, I agree that our economies will be affected in ways, more than one way. So, I'll agree on that aspect. But I want to divert a little bit, Mr. Cornelius, with your permission, on something that we are inside the news, something that happened regionally and internationally that caught the region's attention and the world over.
Right. I understand that, caller, but we're really trying to stick on topic today. We don't want to go off on topic today. We're really trying to focus on the pros and cons of a lockdown. So if what you're bringing is close to that, then that is absolutely fine. But we really want to stick on the topic today, which is the pros and cons of a lockdown. But for this hour, we're looking at the financial impact and the economic impact.
So nothing else in this usually something like of the United Nations Assembly sitting and what the United Nations decision might be. That would
right. I understand what you're saying.
One of the 193 members of the United Nations.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, but today,
said, whatever
and
appeal our attention needs a discussion. Nothing of what none of the other leaders would have said that would have shaped and molded how our economy would have been able to fare beyond post-COVID.
I understand what you're saying, but today we are focusing on this particular topic. At a later date, we're going to come back and we're going to explore these.
I am not going to say much more. I agree. I'm not going to say much more. But inside the news, the program, I think that persons who have relevant news, newsworthy, regional, international, even local, we need to echo our sentiments.
Right, Colin, thank you so much for your contribution to this program. I understand what you're saying, but I'm focusing on a particular topic today. The topic today is the pros and cons of a lockdown. And that is what we're focusing on today. We're looking at, for the second hour, the financial impact. And this is something that people have been that people are talking about every day, especially now that we have cases rising. I understand you want to bring that to the forefront, caller, but respect the fact that we are focusing on a particular topic today. If necessary, and if I see fit, then I will discuss these other issues and any other issue at a later date. But today, we are focusing on the pros and cons of a lockdown, particularly for this hour, the financial impact. It is 5 minutes to the hour of 1. I want to take a break to give a shout out to the sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. Let's take this break and we'll be right back. And after that, we're going to have this clip played for you. Let's take this break. We're coming back.
Gift for Dad's birthday? Click. Ooh, Janice's retirement party? Click. Outfit for my girl's wedding? Click. With TDC Airbox, you click, we ship. Register for your free US mailbox today and shop all your favorite stores online. Enjoy the convenience. Free consolidation up to £10. Competitive rates. Free package tracking account with live notifications. Free delivery and, of course, excellent customer service. Visit our website at tdcairbox.com and register today. For more information, visit our offices at the C.A. Paul Industrial Site in St. Kitts and Penny's Industrial Site in Nevis. Follow us on social media at TDC Airbox. TDC Airbox. You click, we ship. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go.
Welcome back to Inside the News on 1FM 98.9. It is exactly 1 o'clock here in the studios of 1FM 98.9. We have just 30 minutes of Inside the News left. And today we are talking about the pros and cons of a lockdown. This has been on the minds of many people throughout social media, throughout St. Kitts and Nevis, as to whether there is a need for a COVID-19 lockdown, especially against the backdrop of the COVID-19 cases rising, increasing rapidly. We are exploring the conversation. For the first hour, we looked at the mental health aspect of it. And for this afternoon, we want to focus on the economic or financial impact of COVID-19 lockdowns on the economy. We're going to have this clip played, which will explain in its entirety, how economies have been affected over the years and bringing it closer to now by these lockdowns. This clip is from The Economist, the YouTube channel. Let's have this clip played.
COVID-19 has brought the global economy to its knees.
The pandemic has been an enormous, synchronized global economic shock on a scale which has not been seen since the Second World War.
By the end of 2020, the world's GDP may be about 7.5% lower than it would have been without the pandemic. Globally, more than 15% of young people who were in work before COVID-19 have lost their jobs. Widespread lockdowns have turbocharged changes that were already affecting the world economy in technology, finance, and trade. How governments adapt to these seismic changes will determine how rapidly countries' economies can recover. In April this year, American unemployment was the highest since the Depression. Back then, around a quarter of Americans were jobless. But from the bleak depression of the 1930s was born the New Deal, an ambitious federal plan to create jobs and kickstart the economy.
40% of those seeking work have found it. We have a long way to go, but we are on the way.
The crises of the 20th century forced governments to change their policies for the better.
It's often been the case that after big periods of economic upheaval, you've had a reforging of the relationship between the individual and the state.
The Second World War was followed by an expansion of the welfare state in Europe. And high unemployment and inflation of the 1970s led to Ronald Reagan's and Margaret Thatcher's free market economics. But in the 21st century, the largest economic shocks have not led to such a change.
The global financial crisis, people thought maybe you'd have a rethinking of how banking worked, but in the end, you only got incremental reform. The effects of trade with China were not adequately anticipated by Western policymakers. They did not think about the impact it would have on some workers who were exposed to it, and I don't think enough thinking had been done about the implications of big tech for the economy and society.
Those on the losing side of these economic shifts have felt left behind.
The result is you've got the rise of populist politicians like President Trump, the vote for Brexit, the rise of right-wing or economically nationalist populism around the world. And then among the young, you have this leftward drift, this support for politicians like Bernie Sanders, for Jeremy Corbyn.
The pandemic is the fourth economic shock of the 21st century. This time, governments could choose to respond differently. In the aftermath of the global financial crisis, many governments, especially in Europe, chose to tighten their belts rather than spend. The result was slow economic recovery.
You had governments which turned to fiscal austerity, to cutting spending to balance their budgets too soon, which also weakened the recovery and made it slower than it otherwise could have been. Now we have the pandemic, an economic downturn that's very deep, and I think it's important that governments don't repeat the mistakes of the 2010s.
So far, spending is exactly what governments have been doing. And to pay for that spending, governments have been borrowing. A lot. To keep borrowing costs down, central banks in America, Britain, Japan, and the euro area have created new money worth almost $4 trillion. That money has financed household income payments, furloughed millions of workers, and bailed out businesses.
At the moment, interest rates are very low, and so despite the fact that you have this enormous debt that's been run up as a result of the pandemic, the costs of servicing it are not high. So there is no doubt that there's space for governments to support the economy.
But no one knows if or when interest rates are going to rise. And should that happen, it'll be the taxpayer forced to shoulder the burden of this vast public debt.
The balance governments have to strike is not turning to austerity too quickly, but then if and when interest rates start to rise, to be aware that they are very indebted and they need to ensure that their fiscal policies are sustainable.
The pandemic has brought about enormous changes. Perhaps the biggest is that for many people, the office has gone from here to here. And on the whole, they seem to prefer it. 60% of Americans who can work from home want to continue doing it at least one day a week after COVID. And in the long term, it could boost economic growth and actually decrease inequality.
One of the chief constraints on growth was the fact that it was very expensive to live near cities where jobs were increasingly congregating, especially good jobs, places like London, Paris, San Francisco, New York, Tokyo. So there is clearly an opportunity, if people do shift towards working from home, to ease that constraint.
Working remotely has been made possible thanks to a fast and widespread adoption of technology, which existed before the pandemic, but wasn't being used to its full potential.
This digital push that's now taking place as a result of the pandemic will lead to an accelerated change in the economy. Ultimately, disruption is what drives long-term living standards. The important thing is that governments, I think, embrace this change rather than standing in the way and seeing it as a scary force that must be stopped.
Of course, not everyone will benefit from the remote work revolution. The urban service sector, in particular, is expected to shrink. But voters may be more likely to support disruption if the risks are shared more equally. When the world went into lockdown, millions of businesses found themselves unable to operate and with no way to pay their employees. So governments were forced to respond in an innovative way.
I think that's because there was this widespread sense that you couldn't do anything about the fact that you were unemployed as a result of the restaurant at which you worked being shut. Lockdowns were a bolt from the blue, and so the government stood behind everybody and replaced household incomes to an extraordinary degree.
In America, Congress announced a stimulus package worth $2 trillion, which included direct cash payments to almost every American. The British government rolled out a £30 billion job support scheme, and in Europe's 5 largest economies, more than 40 million workers were placed on government-funded short work schemes.
The downside to furlough schemes is that they do have this potential to keep people locked in zombie jobs which aren't coming back when the economy recovers. But the principle that household incomes in some sense can be underwritten during a large economic shock over which those households have no control is, I think, an interesting one that could be applied in future. What we've seen this year is that governments can move pretty fast to put money in the pockets of households directly, and the households will spend that money. Direct cash transfers to households do work fairly well and are not subject to quite the same level of haggling and perhaps the same degree of waste that you might get with other forms of fiscal stimulus.
While governments have sought to intervene domestically, internationally there's also been an increase in protectionism when countries shield their industries against foreign competition. The crisis has caused panic about the fragility of global supply chains.
Stalled production lines across China.
The global supply chain right now is disrupted.
A lot of firms this year paid a lot more attention to their supply chains, and it's more fashionable now to think about the robustness and resilience of those supply chains, which often means bringing them closer to the home or at least diversifying your suppliers.
There was concern in particular around personal protective equipment. Many countries blocked export of PPE and similar items. According to the IMF, there have been almost 120 new export restrictions this year.
This is coinciding with a movement towards protectionism on a global scale, with a trade war between America and China. And it's clearly a risk that coming out of the pandemic, you have leaders who are very concerned about promoting national champions, less concerned about competition rules, and really want supply chains brought home.
Despite this shift towards protectionism, there is reason to be optimistic. Government economic response to the virus has been swift and on a massive scale.
I don't think many people would have predicted that government would act that fast and that capably. They've acted much better, I would say, on the economic side than they have in terms of controlling the disease in many countries.
As with the economic shocks of the 20th century, COVID-19 presents an opportunity for a reforging of the relationship between government and the individual, in ways that many hoped would follow the previous shocks of the 21st century. The question is whether today's politics is up to the job.
Hi, I'm Henry Kerr, The Economist's economics editor. I've written a special report on the effect the pandemic is having on the world economy. You can read it by clicking the link opposite. Thanks for watching.
Buying your medication is easy with City Drug Store's curbside pickup. WhatsApp our certified pharmacist at 662-8769 with your requests. For prescriptions, take a clear photograph and send for review. We will engage you in dialogue and then provide a quotation and link for payment. You can then pay via TDC's online payment portal. And once the transaction is complete, you'll be notified that your pickup is ready. Yes, it's that easy. Send your WhatsApp message to 662-8769 to order your medications today with City Drug Store's curbside pickup service.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News on 1FM 98.9. We have a caller on the line. We'll take this call. Caller? Okay, we lost that caller. We seem to have lost that caller. We're still taking calls here on 1FM 98.9. Okay, you can call us back at 466-0989, 762-0989, and 662-0989. It is 14 minutes past the hour. Of course, you know, we're going to wrap up at 1:30. We have a caller. Let's take this call. Caller, good afternoon. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cornelius.
Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I, for one, will not let the government off the hook when it comes to the economic response to COVID. It has become fashionable, to say government cannot do everything, and that is obviously true. But especially in an economy like ours, where government plays such a significant role, we must hold them accountable for how the economy performs, even in this crisis. Because what they do or don't do, whatever policies they adopt, will impact the whole country. It's not like in developed economies where the private sector drives the economy and drives growth and drives development. Okay? Here, it's mostly government that does that. People will say that's unfortunate, but that's the economy as it is right now. I think the first mistake that government made was not to close our borders early enough, because had we done that, we would be assured that there would have been no cases, and the entire local economy, minus tourism, would have been able to continue business as usual. And more folks would have been working, there would be more circulation of available money, and less need for government intervention, certainly in terms of handouts, okay? That would have been reserved just for the tourism sector, because the others would have been up and functioning, right? We would not even have had the need for the lockdown that you refer to, right, until we eventually acquired cases, okay? When the Argentinian breach occurred, for instance, which was the start of the cases, the economy could have been performing as usual, minus the tourism. I don't think we leveraged our unique position during that first year of COVID when, we had no cases. I don't think we leveraged our position well enough. The subsequent lockdowns were difficult and disruptive, but they were necessary to control the spread. And yes, people don't like them because they severely impact lives and livelihoods, but they must be looked at in terms of costs weighed against benefits. In the latest outbreak, for instance, you notice how stubborn it has been. It's been going on for weeks, right? And we have to look at whether it would have been better to take 2 weeks of really bitter medicine, okay, than this agonizing weeks and weeks, drip by drip pain, right? It feels, like a never-ending war of attrition. Nobody knows when we will reach a steady state, down to when the numbers become acceptable once again, right? And is vaccination really the only solution? Of course, vaccinations work, and the more people we have vaccinated, the better, okay? But none of us seem to know where we will be 6 months from now, okay? Once we open up fully later this month, once the flights start coming in again, once quarantine restrictions are eased, we don't know what will happen, And so lockdown, as unpalatable as they are, must be part, unfortunately, of the toolkit in the fight against COVID, all right? It's against all this that I don't understand why the government seems to not be paying more attention to a change in economic policy that will make us more resilient. If you look at it, what are the pillars that have survived relatively untouched? Okay, government spending or stimulus. I guess you can call that a pillar right now. Yes, they're using reserves like Social Security, and that we're going to have to pay very close attention to that because that's not bringing in new money. That's not being productive. Okay, there's the CBI. There's offshore education. There's manufacturing, agriculture, the retail sector, and construction. Now, it would seem obvious that there should be an attempt to strengthen all these pillars, okay, except, of course, for government spending, which bleeds money as opposed to creating it, okay? And so, yes, I can understand the attempt to make these sectors thriving again. I can even understand the attempt to bring back tourism, even in the current situation, okay? But that, to some extent, or to a great extent, is beyond our control, the tourism part of it. And what we really need to do is look at the other options, all right? But, you know, for some time now, from the Chamber of Industry and Commerce down, people have been calling on the government to fashion a plan for post-COVID recovery. And I don't understand the reluctance to do that. I mean, just like how we had New York to manage COVID, I think it's absolutely necessary that we have an economic task force that's going to manage the COVID recovery, okay, rather than just leave it to a day-to-day reactive approach to managing the economy. You need a proactive approach, a plan to look at different options and with the intent of making us more resilient and assuming a leadership position in whatever new ventures, new industries that may be out there that may be able to replace tourism in the short run. Okay, I have no doubt that tourism will bounce back, but when, you know, and in the meantime, we should not be just twiddling our thumbs. You know, we should be trying to do things, okay, and government is in a position to lead this, I think. All right, sure. Private investors, private entrepreneurs can themselves come up with ideas of their own. But we know, like I said, in our economic situation, government is what provides leadership, incentives, money, big partnerships, the big stuff that makes the big difference. Okay, and I'm not seeing that currently. All right, so, you know, I hope they'll eventually come around to doing it, but we certainly can't just be winging it as we seem to be doing it right now. Okay, we have to come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan that will sustain us for the future, immediate and long term. Okay then.
Right, caller, thank you so much for your contribution to this program. We are wrapping up and we can take just one more call to end out today's edition of Inside the News. If we have no calls at this point in time, I would want to agree with the caller to some extent. When you spoke of having an economic, or let me add to it, an economic recovery task force, I think that is vital to the economy bouncing back post COVID-19. And so while we are just focusing on the health aspect, we are completely forgetting that this too is a financial crisis. And so perhaps the government should consider setting up or putting in place an economic recovery task force where that, as you mentioned, instead of just, looking at it from, a day-to-day, have some serious planning and strategy sessions going on to ensure that the economy is performing or can be in a position to rebound and to get back to pre-pandemic levels. I agree with you when you say too that the government really has to do their part. And so, it's not in any way to say, oh, the government at this point in time can't do anything. The government too has its part to play. And I would assume that at this point in time, Caribbean governments in particular, they are putting things in place to ensure that they safeguard their economies, they safeguard the little employment that is left. But I think more can be done. And I think with a focus on the economic recovery aspect of this whole pandemic is really important. We're focusing on the health aspect in terms of lowering and curbing the spread, vaccination and all of that, but we're forgetting the economic recovery. I have realized in the past that when you ask questions of how are we going to get back to pre-pandemic levels, what is your plan to reposition the economy? The answer is vaccinate. But I think what can be added to that is simple. Having an economic recovery task force. Focus on it directly. That is just my humble suggestion. And yes, as the science has proven, the vaccines work. The vaccines work. It's not that it's a bulletproof vest. And even sometimes you wear a bulletproof vest, you can still get wounded. But it provides a layer of protection. And so if we just take these small steps, government, private sector, individually, I think very soon we can be out of this COVID-19 pandemic. There is a lot more that can be done. There is a lot more we can do as a people to really put us back in a level of normalcy or some state of normalcy. And we can't really leave everything up to one person. We can't really rely on one entity or one sector of the economy. Because as a previous caller put it right, the economy is not just the government, but so many other areas. I think this was a really good discussion, and I thank you guys so much for participating in today's program. We were able to, talk on the mental health aspect and the financial economic impact aspect of lockdowns stemming from COVID-19. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was a very good discussion, and it was an opportunity for me to learn from you and for you to learn from me. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to conversations like these. We're going to wrap up today's edition of Inside the News, and we're coming back next week with our Voices and Inside the News program. Stay tuned to NFM 98.9. I've been your host for today, Devon Cornelius. Thank you guys. Have a fantastic, super Saturday. Remember to wear your mask, wash your hands, and wear a clean mask. Don't forget, wear a clean mask. Wash your hands and I encourage you to wear your seatbelt. If you're driving and you're listening, please wear your seatbelt. Make sure you have your seatbelt. Safety first. This has been Inside the News. Until next time, stay safe. I hope to hear from you next week. God's blessings. Have a good one.
Property insurance can save The best team in the business. Guarantee you peace of mind. No other company will guarantee you peace of mind. Together we'll succeed and guarantee you peace of mind. TDC Insurance Company Limited, where you get more coverage for less.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all